On May 23, 2022, the Tampa Bay Lightning swept the President's Trophy winners, the Florida Panthers. This embarrassing playoff exit was actually the beginning of a new era in Florida. This led to the Panthers making the most significant trade in franchise history, and it has propelled them to become one of the greatest teams in NHL history potentially. Trading for Matthew Tkachuk was not like any blockbuster because by making this trade, the Florida Panthers established a framework for becoming a perennial cup contender. Therefore, we must focus on the creator of this framework and its general manager, Bill Zito.
Bill Zito led the Panthers to the playoffs in 2021, breaking their 5-year drought.
He was hired initially in 2020 of September. Bill Zito made a move for Sam Bennett in 2021. We obviously know what he became too. But 2022 is the one we got to look at. And obviously they got in Reinhart. It was a great acquisition by Bill Zito. And at the deadline, they got Claude Giroux. Bill Zito's making big moves because he wants his team to win.
Yeah.
And in that year, they won the President's Trophy. They won the first round, 4-2 against the Washington Capitals. But in the second round, that's where things got a lot shaky, man. It felt like this was a moment for Florida. 2022, you have the edge against Tampa. Tampa's literally under third year off of their back-to-back cups. You know, they might be exhausted. They might be tired, but the exact opposite happens. A 4-0 sweep where the Tampa Bay Lightning just felt like dominated every single game. And after this loss, Bill Zito took a long look at his team and unlocked the first step of his master plan, establishing an identity. Bill Zito did not extend Andrew Brunette, who did an admirable job as the interim head coach when he stepped in mid-season. He then hired Paul Maurice, who is an experienced head coach who wants his players to move the puck quickly, be physical, and have a strong defensive game.
Which was a shocker. Normally when an interim head coach does well, lead the team to the playoffs, do well, I get it, like not the results they wanted, they get rewarded. We saw Jim Hiller, Drew Bannister before obviously Jim Montgomery got available there. In this case, Zito was like, no, like I don't think he's the guy. But in this case, he saw Paul Maurice being available, and Paul Maurice obviously stepping down very surprisingly from the Winnipeg Jets, saying he could do what he's saying he did everything he possibly could with that team and wanted a break. So him coming back was just a surprise to the NHL because how quick that break ended. And like you said, he has an identity, he has a culture set. We saw that slightly in Winnipeg, but they didn't get the results they wanted. And now he was trying to bring that over to Florida.
At the end of the day, Zito got the culture-setting head coach in Paul Maurice. But he still needs to emphasize that culture among the players. And therefore, he went on to make the most significant trade in Panthers history.
Got breaking news. Matthew Tkachuk is heading to Florida.
I'm at the perfect place, exactly where I want to be right now in Florida. So
I don't have any doubt that what happened to them in the playoffs, their 4-game sweep at the hands of Tampa in the second round, probably had something to do with this, about what they felt they needed. But he took the biggest swing he could, considering the situation he was in.
Bill Zito sent a message to everyone about this deal. The reason this was significant for me is that they got rid of their homegrown talent in Jonathan Huberdeau, who was coming off a 115-point season. Huberdeau's style did not align with what Bill Zito was looking for. The reason why Barkov or Bennett was not a part of this deal is one, because they're also younger, but number two, they did not just adopt a new system, they literally became the new system. And in return, the player that Bill Zito got literally bleeds this Florida Panther culture.
Matthew Tkachuk was available. Matthew Tkachuk wasn't this fully established guy in Calgary. He was rumored to go to different teams, right? Obviously go back to where he was from St. Louis. So in this case, like Florida wasn't the talks, but it was like, okay, it's probably not gonna be Jonathan Huberdeau. He was your leading playmaker essentially from the wing, 115 points. How are you gonna replace that? And Matthew Tkachuk hasn't at that point proved to be that guy. But again, like you said, the way the Tkachuk brothers in general play, we saw that in this year in Team USA, what type of player he is. He obviously is a point producer. We saw that in his that first year where he was final 3, I believe, in the Hart, but and then play the grit of ability of being that being in your face, like an elevated version, in my opinion, of Brad Marchand.
So Bill Zito sent the message to NHL that this is gonna be the new Florida Panthers culture by getting rid of your top playmaker and bringing in a two-way player type like Matthew Tkachuk, and already having Barkov and Bennett, and even Reinhardt, who has a good two-way ability himself. In the 2022 and 2023 season, the Panthers did have a tough start to the regular season, but managed to go on a hot run near the end to clinch the final wildcard spot in the East. Their reward was to face the Boston Bruins, who put up the best regular season in NHL history. The Panthers were down 3-1, and the turning point of this series was when Sergei Bobrovsky returned between the pipes. Bobrovsky, in a Panther sweater, was a shell of his former self. After signing a fat contract with an AAV of $10 million for Florida, his play rapidly declined. But the Bobrovsky that entered the Bruins series was the Vezina-type goalie from Columbus, and the Panthers pulled off one of the greatest upsets in NHL history.
Would have been a whole different story if Brad Marchand, again, funny how he's involved in this story now, just scored on that breakaway to beat the buzzer, essentially.
My biggest takeaway from this Boston series was that Bobrovsky returned, because from that point on, we started seeing the normal Sergei Bobrovsky, the all-world goaltender Sergei Bobrovsky, more often as well. Because of that, Sergei Bobrovsky returned. They went on, defeated the Leafs in 5 games in the second round, and they swept the Hurricanes in the Eastern Conference Finals. I guess there's no surprise there because the Leafs and Canes are literally.
The Canes was still a surprise, more than the Leafs. The Leafs getting out of the first round was still a big deal,
but now,
to be fair.
In hindsight, we know that there are perennial playoff chokers, and that's the label they have adopted for themselves. And they reached their first Stanley Cup final since 1996, where their Cinderella magic ran out against the Vegas Golden Knights, who were literally by far the best team of that regular season and that playoff run, and they won the Stanley Cup in 5 games.
I'm sure we're going to talk about this later on as well, like who's the best team in our generation, I guess, like the Cap era, essentially. And this Vegas team had a huge shout. It doesn't help that Matthew Tkachuk got hurt as well. He was either playing injured or didn't even play a couple of games there as well. So at a certain point, at the end of the day, that's the shitty part about Cinderella runs. Usually when you get to the point where you could win it all, it kind of goes down.
There's one takeaway from the season, and the Panthers' new culture was a success in their first year by making the Stanley Cup final. And with their all-world goaltender returning to form, they doubled down on this roster and went for it again in the following season. The only major addition they made was Vladimir Tarasenko, which obviously was a help in the offensive side. But other than that, they doubled down on this roster, they went for it, and they went on to win the Atlantic Division next the following season, and dominated their way through the playoffs all the way up to the 2024 Stanley Cup final, where they were up 3-0. But unfortunately for them, Connor McDavid just woke up.
That's not fucking good enough. It's the fucking finals. 1 win, and we'll see what fucking happens. But dig the fuck in.
Victory for the Edmonton Oilers in Game 4, 8-1.
Save today! McDavid lifting it, scores! Connor McDavid has done it again, and this one's going back to Edmonton.
A series that looked nothing like a competitive one early has a chance to walk into history.
Almost did the unthinkable in the Stanley Cup final, which could have maybe led to a whole different story for this Florida Panthers team if it went down that way.
But Reinhardt's game-winning goal of Game 7, the Panthers avoided disaster and went on to win their first Stanley Cup in franchise history. Paul Maurice wins his first Stanley Cup as a head coach, and the way that Bill Zito constructed his roster was genius, and this is where he used the second part of his framework. Having quality depth is crucial for cup-winning teams. There is hard evidence in the Stanley Cup final. The Panthers' depth pieces outperformed those of the Oilers. The way Bill Zito acquired his depth is genius. He found a bunch of hidden gems, starting with Carter Verhaeghe and Gustav Forsling. Both players were overlooked by their teams. The only difference is that Verhaeghe was a free agent signing and Forsling was claimed from waivers. Fast forward to the Cup run, and Carter Verhaeghe scored many game-winning goals, and Gustav Forsling became one of the best stay-at-home defensemen in the league. Both players were also rewarded with contract extensions. Next is Oliver Ekman-Larsson, who has a label of being a washed-up defenseman in his early 30s, who was bought out by the Vancouver Canucks. Fast forward 1 year, and he is playing big minutes for a cup-winning team. In the 2024 offseason, OEL was rewarded with a contract by the Maple Leafs, and the Panthers found his replacement in another old, washed-up defenseman in Nate Schmidt, who was just bought out by the Winnipeg Jets. Fast forward to March 2025, Zito traded for Seth Jones. Jones has been a good player in his career, but never played to his full potential until he put on a Panthers jersey. Jones led the Panthers in ice time in the playoffs. A lot of credit goes to the coaching and development staff as well. Zito brought these players in, but they are the ones to unlock their potential. They did so by instilling the Panther culture of being hard to play against while allowing each player to be themselves. Zito mastered the art of acquiring hidden gems, allowing him to have quality depth, but he also mastered the third step of this cup-winning framework. Every time Zito had an opportunity to get better, he took it. He swung for the fence when he got Sam Reinhart. He hit a grand slam when he traded for Matthew Tkachuk. And then he hit another home run at the 2025 trade deadline when he got Brad Marchand at the horn. Brad Marchand will go down as one of the greatest trade deadline acquisitions ever.
Like the day
in terms
itself.
Of, on the day itself, in terms of how late it was, in terms of his impact on the playoff run. Florida, Zito and Florida just look at ways to get better. They're not satisfied. And that's why they're so good. Because, like I said, if they have an opportunity to get better, they're going to take it. This cup run was probably more dominant than last year, the 2024 cup run. And that 2024 cup run, I know the cup final went to 7. Obviously, this year's it went to 6. The only hiccup they had was the Leaf series, but they dominated Game 5 and Game 7 on the road off that, coming back down from 0-2. Once again, dominated Carolina Hurricanes in the Eastern Conference Final. And then in literally the Stanley Cup final, that series had no business going 6.
Yeah, they did it to themselves, right?
Yeah.
And like even when you look at Brad Marchand, because of that, what was the common thing? OEL got a contract, Nate Schmidt got contracts. He was highly touted at the end of the day. And now let's move on to the Dynasty side of things now, because that's 2 cup finals, 2 wins, and a 3rd cup final when they lost to Vegas, right, overall. And what was going to be the big question mark? Can they bring back the 3 free agents they had? And everybody said, no, it's not going to be possible. But when you set up a winning culture, when you set up, and it helps here in Florida, we all know the conversation, the weather, the taxes, and all that. But when you're able to do that, Aaron Ekblad signed a huge, massive discount, an full 8-year contract. He's there now set, and he's a good defenseman. In my opinion, one of the more underrated defensemen in the league as well. Brad Marchand signed till 43 years old. And finally, Sam Bennett, who got his biggest payday, this Conn Smythe winner, an 8x8 as well, right? So if you're talking about dynasties, there already are, because I don't think there's no real team in the East that are at their level. And the West, you could argue maybe Vegas at the moment.
When you're looking at it, these guys, this core is not an aging core. They still have many years, not just 1 or 2, like 3 or 4 in my opinion, where they could be at the top of the NHL. And overall, when you look at it, to me, they already are a dynasty, and they could even be better, which is crazy. And the most remarkable aspect is that Zito has constructed this roster with no player earning over $10 million per year. Bill Zito has not just built a team, he has assembled a force of the best two-way players in the NHL, complemented by elite goaltending and an impeccable coaching staff. It is mind-boggling how this man has not won the Jim Gregory GM of the Year award, but he is a GM who has changed the way the rest of the NHL thinks. Before, every GM would think like, how can I improve this team and take the next step? And now, they all think about, how the hell do we beat the Florida Panthers? And a GM who got the rest of the league thinking like that is truly the greatest general manager in the NHL.